Podcasting from a secret location deep inside the political colossus. This is Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich. Let me tell you, I'm a really smart guy.
What's your name again? John Miller. And you work with Gotham? Yes, that's correct.
Oh my God, they've got a madman on their hands.
We will have no truce nor parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best.
We've come to a turning point, a moment for hard decisions. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls.
This is Radio Free GOP with your host, Mike Murphy.
There's a change that's come over America, a change that's great to see. We're living here in peace again, we're going back to work again, it's better than it used to be. I'm feeling good about America, and I feel it everywhere I go. I'm feeling good.
Late September 1976, President Jerry Ford's re-election campaign is in big trouble. The country is mad. It's after Watergate. People are disillusioned. The economy has been flat. They're looking to punish somebody. It's a wrong track election, and change is in the air. Sound familiar? But what did the Jerry Ford campaign team do? Led by the legendary team of Bailey and Deardorff, with an assist from a young firebrand creative director named Bob Gardner, they decided it was time to talk about hope, not fear. Bob got out his trusty piano and tapped out a jingle. The song you just heard, called I'm Feeling Good About America. They made a 4.5-minute television commercial featuring positive, iconic American images and homespun, reliable, steady Jerry Ford. They put it on the air more than 20 points behind and started picking up almost a point a day. They got so close to Carter, erasing his lead, that most experts think if the election were held 2 or 3 days later, Jerry Ford would have won. Hope versus fear. That's going to be the topic today on Radio Free GOP.
He used to have a big career, but now he's had enough. Podcasting's like therapy, his shrink says it's great stuff. Radio Free GOP.
Fridays are traditionally the day when one circus leaves town and a new carnival shows up. It felt that way early this morning in the gray rain in Cleveland as the technicians were rapidly packing up the elaborate media sets as they were tearing down the convention setting. The Morning Joe show on MSNBC was kind of Fort Apache, the last outpost still standing to do one more broadcast this morning. I went in there, did my bit. Joe did us a square. He held up one of our T-shirts, and then I was off on the street trying to flag down an Uber and head out of town, just like everybody else. The media beast is hungry again, and it's trotting off east toward Philadelphia to feed once again. But let's think about the Republican convention and what really happened. All the kerfuffles and all the problems, they count in small ways, but the big story, the big moment, was Donald Trump's speech. You got to give him some credit. He committed. He locked down on the message that won him the primary. There was no pivoting. There was no moving forward with new rhetoric, no softer approach. Sure, Ivanka did in her introductory speech, which was so nice and so benign, 2/3 of it could have worked at Hillary's convention. But then her dad came out. It was like Bambi followed by Godzilla. He was singing the hits, the stuff that got him there. The wall, the Mexican immigrants, the Muslim crackdown, the dictate terms to our allies, all the normal Trump bluster, and boy, did it go on. He didn't even need an amplifier. He shouted the speech. You could probably hear him all the way in Indiana. And I think in Cuba, Fidel Castro cocked an ear to the night sky, heard the rumblings, and wondered, this is going on so long I might lose my silver cup for endless oratory. But the delegates seemed to dig it, most of them. More than a few came up to me after the convention and gave me the secret look or the pinch or the hand signal that keep the resistance alive. But more or less, I think people were happy with it because Trump displayed a fighting spirit and he rolled out the old material about Hillary Clinton. His high point was when he pushed back uncharacteristically at the crowd chants of lock her up, saying, no, we're just defeat her. or he said off script, but I believe heartfelt that it warmed his heart that his mention of gay rights got a good reaction from a Republican crowd. That's an evolution from the party, and a good one, I think. But bottom line, Trump was Trump. Can he win? Can this grievance kind of campaign blow through? Well, that's the debate. Some people say this is a change election, and even a big hammer like Trump will fit that change dynamic and be able to beat Hillary with all her endless problems. Others, and I find myself strongly in this second category, think the most powerful change campaigns are about unifying the country behind a charismatic leader who invites everybody to get on the change train, makes it a national cause, a national purpose, enlists all that change energy in forward motion. And that, my friends, that ain't Donald Trump. This was an enemies list kind of speech. It was angry, like the country is, but it offered a darkness, a anger, a grievance, an overall pessimism about America that I think a lot of people will find off-putting. It was the kind of speech that if you like Trump, you'd like him more afterward. But if you didn't like Trump, you don't like him more. I sat there listening to it, thinking I had no idea we live in Gotham City with roving gangs of Mexican rapists and Muslim madmen and canny Chinese trade negotiators amok. What do we seem to need? Well, according to Donald Trump, perhaps a vigilante billionaire fighting crime with an orange cape could solve all our problems. So I remain pessimistic. I think Trump had a chance to do more, and I think he blew it. I think he's locked down the battle lines, and regardless of whatever noise meter poll in the next 48 hours may show a little lift, now the Democrats are going to put on their show, draw their contrast, and we'll see where the race really is after both conventions. But I've been wrong about Trump before. I didn't think he'd win the Republican primary. I thought Ted Cruz would be the king of the grievance vote, and one of the regular Republicans, hopefully Jeb Bush, but maybe Chris Christie or Marco Rubio or John Kasich, would become the head of the regular, positive, conservative Republican faction, and then those two would battle it out for the finals. But that's not what happened. Trump grabbed votes from every silo, and he won. So now we're going to continue the Trump experiment, and to figure this all out, I'm bringing in a real Trump expert. Radio Free GOP is the voice of the Republican resistance, so we're pretty hard on Trump here, and I thought, well, in fairness, we could stand a little equal time. So I called up an old pal of mine, the Dark Prince of American politics, Mr. Roger Stone, and asked him to come to our podcasting Cleveland Bureau, the magnificent Harbor Inn across the river, and have a little interview. That's coming up later. I think you're going to enjoy it. But first, it's time to pay the bills.
Mike Murphy, podcasting sanity, Radio Free GOP.
We shove a lot of electrons here at Radio Free GOP. Yap, 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 that's all we do, and we send it to you through the miracle of the interweb. But bandwidth costs money. So do producers and these jingle singers, they like top dollar. So you can do your part to help keep this little ship of ours afloat. It's been pretty successful, I have to admit. We're now already in the top 100 of the iTunes list of political podcasts, racing up the charts, so thank you for that. But if you want to chip in a buck or two, check out our website, www.radiofreegop.com. There you will find our high-quality American-made t-shirts. They come in formal blue, perfect for wearing to the opera or the inaugural, or dashing white with red ink. Both feature our logo with the upside-down Republican elephant in distress, and let me tell you, they are the talk of the fashion industry in Paris and Milan. Morning Joe Scarborough held one up on the camera this morning on Morning Joe, and the phones are ringing off the hook. Beat your local supermodel to get one of these things while supplies still last. They are in stock and we are shipping them out. You can get them on the website at a reasonable price. Also, we have a little logo on the website of Amazon.com. If you're thinking of making a hugely irresponsible purchase, maybe a cigarette boat or helicopter lessons, anything expensive or even anything cheap, click that little logo before you buy. It'll take you right to the Amazon site, and Mr. Bezos will chip off a few pennies of what he charges you. Your price stays the same, and give them to us to pay the electric bill and keep those electrons pumping out through the interweb to bring you this podcast. We'd appreciate it. Now, back to work. So what about the Democrats? For them, it's on to Philadelphia, and the media beast will be there looking to feed. Now, it's true the media beast occasionally attends a Democratic meeting or two, but all in all, beasts like to eat. So if the Democrats make mistakes like Trump did with the logistics of the convention, they're going to hear about it. I have a feeling the Democratic convention managers are going to try to make that a big deal and say they had a mistake-free convention, make sure they get the various speakers on and off at the right time and all the other sort of things that the media yardstick is applied to. But we'll see. Mistakes do happen, and they are Democrats. They're disorganized. I mean, if they came up with that health care plan, then we'll see how they do on a convention timetable. But all in all, I think it will be a highly competent convention. The question is, how will the big news of Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, the former governor, play? He was the boring choice, boring and safe. And that makes sense because the Democrats are going to sell a message of Trump equals dangerous risk. You're going to hear a lot about how risky and unproven and reckless Donald is, how safe and steady and experienced Hillary Clinton is. And then, just like the Republican convention, the rubber will hit the road when she has to give a speech. It is not her strong suit. We will see if we get a new and improved Hillary Clinton, because one of the reasons that we Republicans are in business is that the Democrats have a candidate that people don't trust and don't like. Can they move the character needle on Hillary Clinton? Can they make her a safe choice you can rely on, but also somebody you can trust? They're looking at that big meat axe of a change election. And while I think Trump is overplaying his hand badly with his grievance politics and his dark outlook of the country, she still has problems too, because if you want to change politics, why would you ever vote for Hillary Clinton? So it'll be time for the big Democratic lift. I'll be watching it. I'll be talking to Democratic sources. I'll be popping up on NBC and MSNBC from time to time, and we'll do a podcast about all this after we've had a few days of convention. Remember, conventions are a high wire act with plenty to lose. We'll see how Tim Kaine does in the national spotlight. We'll see how all that lefty energy behind Bernie Sanders puts up with Kaine, a more centrist choice. That energy has to go somewhere, and it could make for a rocky convention for Hillary Clinton. I have a feeling that her team have the same set of big players under the podium that the Republicans did to knock any delegates back in line, but we'll see. Me, I'm hoping for a total meltdown because that's entertaining, and I am a Republican. So we will find out this week if Philadelphia is indeed the city of democratic brotherly love. So if Trump is going to be our vigilante billionaire cleaning up Gotham City, if we're going to have an orange bat carrying the Republican ticket, I thought it was only fair to go to somebody who really knows Trump and how he operates. The person actually who's more or less, in my view, the architect of the Trump insurrection, the person who saw Trump first and saw he could be a presidential candidate first. You got to give him some credit for that, and I'm talking about the dark prince of American politics, Roger Stone. Stone was the first guy in the 80s when Trump was hitting the New York real estate and tabloid scene who I think saw he could be the perfect populist campaign for president. Well, Stone's dream, others would say America's nightmare, has come true. Now, Stone may be the most hated person in American politics. He's seen as an expert on dirty tricks, but I know the real Roger Stone is a little more complicated. He is a savvy strategist with a great historical grip of politics, a love for the game. I mean, I've known him a long time. We've always gotten along. He's kind of a friend of mine, though I don't see him very often. He's in his underground troublemaking cave somewhere in Miami. So, in the interest of equal time, I thought we'd bring Roger Stone to the Radio Free GOP podcast. He agreed not to think out our secret location to the Trump police, and I agreed to let him make his case. Following the great rule from Dr. Strangelove, there will be no fighting in the war room. We had a revealing conversation. Stone talked about how the Trump campaign works internally, about Corey Lewandowski, not his favorite guy, about how Trump processes information, his style. And then we had a big finish where Roger offered to send me a copy of his book Attacking Jeb Bush, and I offered to burn it in my fireplace. It was classic Stone. Here he is, the Dark Prince himself, Roger Stone.
It's time to ask some questions and go behind the scenes. Here's our latest interview. We'll try to keep it clean. Radio Free GOP.
So, Roger, thanks for doing Radio Free GOP.
Great to be here.
So let me start by letting you do an ad for Donald Trump, because I've been a Trump critic. They hear playing that shit from me on this podcast. I want to let you make the case for him.
Sure. The American people are fed up with the political class. They're fed up with the political system. They're also, interestingly enough, I think for the first time, fed up with the mass media, the mainstream media, who they view as in bed with the establishment. And they're looking for somebody with the gumption and the size and the vision, but more importantly, somebody with a record of getting things done, actually doing things, not just talking about them, but actually doing them. Trump fits that bill for the voters. I do think to a certain extent there's this tendency to project onto him what you want to see. But he, above all, he's not a career politician. He's not beholden to special interests. He managed to get nominated with no polling, no analytical targeting, no paid media, although the paid media he did have, the key thing is to always rotate 5 spots on too few gross rating points to make sure that nobody sees anything. No mail, no counterpunch to the
none of the normal stuff we all do.
Stuff that we all do, because as Trump likes to say, oh, that crap is just so you guys can make commissions. So I was skeptical that you could combat hundreds of millions of dollars of negative television through free media. I just didn't think you could get enough frequency, and you couldn't dominate the media enough to do that. And he did it. In other words, there were days when he would do 10, 12, 15 interviews a day. We would turn on the television or the cable or the radio and get wall-to-wall Trump.
Right. And he was always interesting. He knows what they're looking for. And so he's very good at being the dominant story of the day.
Yeah, because he knows how to make news. He completely understands the news cycle. Yeah. And because he is unscripted, unprogrammed, uncoached, you never know what you might get. And therefore, there's kind of a, wow, let's tune in to Trump because God knows what he might say today. It's like a man working without a net,
Yeah, he is the great Melinda. And that's been a little of the story of this convention. What'll happen tomorrow for good or bad. So where does it go from here? Because we're now out of the primary, which was a more natural stomping ground for him. We're into a big, complicated general election. We got a Democrat candidate everybody hates, but Trump's numbers aren't great either. And all that stuff he didn't do in the primaries with the analytics and blah, blah, blah. Can he grow into that? Does he need to? What's your view of the Trump map forward? Because you before you were now, you used to be a square regular. You're never completely a square regular consultant.
Correct.
But I've never been a completely square regular consultant either. But we were both in that same world a bit. I'm kind of still in it. You've created a whole new thing for yourself. But you know how that world works.
Yes.
You've done it.
Yes, those things, and those things used to work, and they may work yet again. In other words, Trump may be singular.
Right.
He may be so unique as a political figure. Doing without them only works for him because of his ability to dominate the media. But I would say that he's now doing polling.
Right.
As he said to Paul Manafort, okay, you can hire a pollster as long as I don't have to listen to him, which was kind of half kidding. But look, Fabrizio is very good. I think he's the best in the business personally. He's very combative. He knows how to translate numbers to strategy. He's an ideas guy. He is not opposed to the big play, as Dick Nixon used to say. He's a risk taker. So I think he's right, and he's got the same pugnacious style as Trump. So I think he's the right guy for the campaign. Manafort is a master organizer. I like this guy, Jason Miller, who's their communications guy. I think he's very good. So he's got an A team, and I think they're playing catch-up ball. We wasted many months with Corey Lewandowski, who had, he was Bob Haldeman without the charm. He's an advance man.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looked to me like he was an advance guy, like get a hall, blue curtain flag,
right.
How did he get in there? Where did he come from? We don't know where he is now, but what's
he was
backstory?
recommended by Dave Bossy from Citizens United, who's a friend of Donald's. His only previous race was the really unbelievable reelection of New Hampshire Senator Bob Smith, who I think is the only Republican U.S. Senator to lose a primary in this century, a race that was always winnable, but perhaps the worst campaign in American political history.
He's also famous for one of the most spectacular boat crashes on Lake Winnipesaukee, where he went right into the rocks.
Right, exactly. That kind of figures.
Nobody was surprised.
In a way. Corey, I think, had a tendency to just say yes. Trump would say, I want that moon painted blue, and he'd say, yes, Mr. Trump, or yes, sir. Still calls him Mr. Trump. That tells you a lot right there. So I just think he was the wrong guy. He's an advanced man, exactly right, but he had no particular political skills, and he definitely had no people skills, and didn't build anything. Now, that's not entirely his fault, but I don't even think he argued for building those things. I think he figured out pretty early that Trump had his own vision of how to get nominated. But now we're in a different phase of the campaign, and therefore you're going to see, I hope, some analytics. So, for example, I think the Democrats have always done a better job at voter registration than we have. We've done a lousy job. There's 1 million votes in the 10 swing states. So figure out what Mitt Romney lost the state by, double that number, and go register. Those people can easily be found through a sophisticated analytic program. Go register those voters. There's 70 days left to do this.
That's
before
it. The clock is ticking.
Right,
yeah.
But it can be done, and the Trump campaign now has identified people who can do it, and I think it will get done.
Do you think, and I'm watching this Thursday speech with great anticipation, because can Trump take advice and can he kind of, as they'd say in show business, widen his act a little for a bigger audience?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is going to be very much like Nixon's 1968 acceptance speech, which to my mind is one of the great political speeches of all time. It's going to be uplifting, it's going to be visionary, but it's also going to be vintage Trump. For those who think he's going to drop his proposal to temporarily ban Muslim immigration until our leaders can figure out what the hell's going on, to coin a phrase, he's not going to drop that. He's going to double down because people want that. Or the alternative is to get killed in a nightclub in Orlando. Every time there is one of these cataclysmic events that's beyond anybody's control, I think they change the whole political atmosphere. You have a few more terrorist attacks, and Trump could win this race, without any of the traditional things.
Yeah, he has strength. That's his brand, by all means. Now, the other guys, the libs, are going to try to make strength into risk.
Yes.
And that's why I think the stuff like NATO gets him in trouble. He needs to be careful on this complicated foreign policy stuff, though he's really briefed up, because he trips over his own shoelaces a little bit on it.
But look, if they try the Goldwater 64 strategy, which is clearly what they have, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's mentally unbalanced, he's a trigger happy, he's going to. I just don't think it's going to work because people see Americans being killed by Islamic terrorists. They see bailouts for the crooks and swindlers on Wall Street, but no jobs for people who need a job and want a job. I just think they're completely fed up, and we've had a foreign policy that's incoherent at best, but always very expensive. We got to go to the national credit card to bomb Libya because we don't have the bread to bomb Libya.
It's the old joke, if we wanted to invade China, we'd have to borrow money from the Chinese to pay the army.
It's exactly true. So, look, and then yesterday's fiasco with Ted Cruz, I think Trump looks magnanimous. Tricky Ted made an agreement to endorse the candidate, and of course he double-crossed them, so he's now backstabbing a Ted.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on that, because normally under the rules that we grew up under, a week before the convention, if there's not a public endorsement of some kind, they don't get near the podium. You have your pliers out and you resolve that.
Right.
This was different, and I guess the campaign's saying they knew that Cruz was going to not come through, so to speak. They didn't have a lot of notice, it appears, but they kind of knew, but they let it happen anyway. Normally, that would be seen as a big mistake. They're arguing now, hey, we don't matter. He's a gnat. We're going to roll through it. It definitely in the delegate world did not serve well. Even Cruz's own delegates in the Texas delegation were killing him this morning. What's your take on the whole thing? If you were running the convention, would you have allowed Cruz to make that move?
First of all, I've heard it slightly differently. What I heard was he would not use the word endorse, but he would say in his remarks he was supporting the ticket and he would vote for Trump-Pence. But I don't believe a word Ted Cruz says. I mean, the man's a psycho. Yeah, he thinks he's Ronald Reagan, but look in the mirror, dude, you're Dick Nixon. The guy is he's sweaty, he's odious. As I told somebody earlier, why do people instantaneously dislike Ted Cruz? They're saving time.
It's like the old Buddy Rich joke from Hollywood. 5,000 people showed up at his funeral when he finally died. Somebody said, really, for Buddy Rich? Yeah, they wanted to make sure he was dead.
Yes, exactly. So if you look at the lesson of history, 1964, the party nominates Goldwater. Goldwater's clearly got an uphill struggle. Rockefeller takes a powder. George Romney takes a powder. The acorn doesn't fall too far from the tree. Scranton takes a powder. Nixon sees only opportunity. He not only endorses Goldwater, he introduces him to the convention. Then he actually campaigns for the Goldwater-Miller ticket in more states than Barry campaigns for himself. 4 years later, where are the conservatives? Goldwater, Buckley, Tower, the big guys? They're not for Ronald Reagan. They're for Dick Nixon because he was there when the party was facing its greatest test.
Right. And he always had the right enemies. Nixon was a genius at that.
Right. So Cruz had a golden opportunity to emerge from this with something and have the Trump people say, boy, good old Ted Cruz. He was there in the crunch. Now, he's the last guy to get booed at a Republican National Convention was Nelson Rockefeller. We are elephants. We have a long memory. This guy will never be president. And right now, I'm actively seeking a challenge for him in the Texas Republican primary.
I was going to bring that up because he's up in 2 years. And after the delegation meeting today. I smell primary in the air.
Well, I had dinner with Alex Jones last night, who was vowed it, and not a insignificant force in Texas. This guy's got millions of viewers, and they're more followers than there are viewers. Yeah, I'd almost guarantee you that Tricky Ted gets a primary, and then as soon as his wife figures out he's not going to be president, she's going to leave him. So I don't think the road ahead is too good for Tricky Ted.
You know the move. You go to Dallas, file. It would be kind of fun to run you could be the Ashcroft of the thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? But who would vote for me? Let's be realistic. I've got more dirt than he does, but then I'm not running
That's
for
what would make
office.
it an interesting
yeah,
campaign.
Exactly.
I always thought I'd go get on the ballot in Ohio, run on a theme of eliminate the middleman, get my 5% of the vote, and make a documentary about it.
It's
but
not
I'm
too bad.
Too lazy.
See, what I think I'm going to do is find all of his ex-girlfriends and put them on a flatbed truck and just drive them all over Texas.
Like I say, you wouldn't need much advertising.
Right,
it would be
exactly.
An interesting primary. So if you were running the convention, though, would you have worked it that way?
If I had,
or would you have tightened it up a little?
I believe he had. I think he made a commitment. Here's the truth: every candidate who ran against him was invited to speak. Right. Some elected not to come. Some elected not to speak. But Walker, Christie, Rubio, they all spoke. In Rubio's case, he made a video, but they all endorsed the ticket.
Right.
If you want to be president someday after
Right.
the 8 years of the Trump presidency, then you ought to do your party duty. It's suicidal. This was a case
and
of
if you want to speak at the
self-immolation.
convention,
Right.
the toll gate you pass is be on board the ticket. I think if Cruz doesn't want to be for Trump, it's a free country. He's got his reasons. I can see the argument, but you don't come here.
Well,
you don't show up, and you don't do it on the podium the night before.
Look, I very, very, rarely agree with Anna Navarro, but she said last night, you don't go to a dinner party, eat the food, drink the wine, and then piss on the carpet, and that's exactly right.
Right. No, I feel the same way about it. So going forward, here they are in a big, complicated presidential campaign. This has not been and I think the technical stuff can be overrated, but it's not been the technically tightest convention in the history of the world. We had the speech writing kerfuffle that I think took an extra day to get rid of. I mean, Paul could have just fired his least favorite intern the next morning, and they could have ended it by lunch.
Yes.
There seems to be a thing in Trump world where they dig in a lot, even when it makes sense to, duck, weave, move around, attack from the other side. What's your take on that? Do you think they'll change up their style, or it's locked in because it's his culture?
Sometimes they'll get it right. Sometimes they'll get it wrong. In this case, I think it took a while to figure out where this mistake was made because, as I understand it, the speech that Manafort reviewed and signed off on didn't have the offending paragraph. So then everybody had to figure out who added these and where in the process. That
was like the Scully draft or whatever was originally there.
Yeah. Scully would never have done this. He's a pro.
Sure.
He's a pro. So somebody added it later, and it took a while to figure out who the somebody was. I'm not even sure that somebody works for the campaigns.
No, I think it was the ballerina/English major, which makes sense. We've all been in campaigns where there's the outside somebody gets called, the favorite veterinarian, but normally then the staff grabs it and tries to get it back into something, and this one slipped through.
Right. So, but the point, of course, is Manafort cannot be blamed for this. The campaign structure cannot be blamed. Then Louis Korendowski is out leaking that Melania is furious and she wants Manafort fired and she wants to bring Corey back. Total fiction.
Is he active in the press stuff? I mean, I saw him try to get into the family suite, and they, got out the.
He was inebriated, as he is much of the time. No, it's even worse than that. I mean, last night after I came out of dinner, I got a breathless call from a political reporter. Eric Trump, he says, is telling people Manafort will be fired and some guy named DeWitt will replace him. Could this be true? And I said, boy, I sure don't think so, but let me make a call. I call Manafort and I tell him this. All I get is uproarious laughter. He dropped the phone. He was laughing so hard. It's all Corey. The guy's just a turd.
So what's it like to give advice to Donald Trump? He's a strong personality. I don't think he's the kind of guy who says, tell me what to do.
No, in fact, that's the exact wrong approach. First of all, he is, I'm an inveterate memo writer. The difference between Dick Morris and me is that mine actually get read. But I understand how to write for his absorption. You write short, pithy stuff in staccato style, and he'll consider your ideas. And every once in a while, a phrase or an idea might pop up that he thought about and liked. But no one really ever puts words in his mouth. If you did, then he would stop being Donald Trump. And if he's no longer Donald Trump, he wouldn't be interesting. If he became boring, as you know, the worst thing in politics, even worse than being wrong, is to be boring.
Yeah.
So, he's a reader. Also, you need to know when to talk to him. He needs to be in the right mood. But he's like Lyndon Johnson. He's a very active user of the telephone. He has a much wider circle of advisors, if you want to call them that. They're really friends, but smart guys. He talks to Rudy Giuliani. He talks to Roger Ailes. He talks to some very smart people, and he gets their thoughts, and he thinks about them. But no one says, oh, Mr. Trump, here's the talking points for today. That will not work.
He synthesizes everything, and then he makes the decision. He kind of does run his brand.
So you don't sell him words. You sell him concepts. You sell him, an idea. It's if he is going to utilize it, it's still in his own words. It's never in your words. This is kind of the reason why I think he's a good candidate, in the sense that he's interesting. Mm-hmm. He's like a man working without a net. You never know what he might say. Let's tune in and see what Trump's going to say tonight.
I totally agree with this. He knows how to hold attention, because everything he does is a high wire act, for good or bad.
Yes.
And that's going to be the great physics test of this campaign. Will Carl Walenda finally fall off the wire?
Well, but let's also remember, we're not running against Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
I mean, you have
that's the best thing he has going for him.
No, you have such an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the crimes of the Clintons, and the more you learn, the worse they get. I mean, there's $6 billion missing from the State Department, just missing. Where did it go? I mean, these people would steal a hot stove.
So in the Trump world, where he's getting this wide circle of advice, suggestions, things to consider, I'll bet there are a bunch of people saying in one ear, write the speech yourself or get speechwriters you trust, but get on prompter and have a tight, well-reasoned Trumpian, in your language, speech at the convention Thursday night, because it'll be really a big moment. The others are saying, let Trump be Trump. You don't work well on the prompter. Vamp it, but here are the points you want to make, because he does like to talk on his feet. He's been a television star. He has some of those skills. Which way do you think he's going to go?
Somewhere in the middle. In other words, here's a guy who, and I saw this, he was quite effective at the Trump-Pence rollout, and I think Pence is a great choice. He's almost the perfect choice. Won't upstage the boss, won't embark on his own agenda, won't contradict the boss, reassures the base of the party, Washington and state experience, above all, a job creator, and great hair.
Yes, it's true.
I mean, creating a new job possibility. I could get employment as a body double. Could be really great.
What do you think about this theory that he was buffaloed a little bit into Pence because there are all those leaks?
Those leaks were Corey pushing his candidate. So
who was Corey for?
He was for Chris Christie.
Christie, right.
So, which would have been an abysmal disaster. I mean, I like Chris Christie, but New York and New Jersey are next to each other. They share the same abysmal abysmal. They share the same pugnacious, campaign style, and we're waiting for the Third Circuit to hand down a decision on the unindicted co-conspirators list over George Washington Bridge.
Yeah, handcuffs are always a problem on the campaign trail.
Yeah, although in the case of Hillary, I would suggest adding them.
I thought it would be, not knowing Trump, I thought it would be Christie just because Trump would want a brawler. But I thought Christie would have trouble on the floor coming out of VP land. Because one thing about Pence is it totally shut down any problem with Christian conservatives on that VP nomination. And I thought there might have been some concern about that, in the Trump machine. So that was a benefit. I don't know if Trump thought of it that way, but I thought some of the people did. And I saw some of those leaks about Pence. So it felt like a little buffalo.
Here's what I think happened. And that is what happened is Trump decided on Pence. As you know, he went to Indianapolis. His plane had mechanical problems right after I deflated the tires, and he ended up staying overnight in Indianapolis. He had a 3-hour dinner with Pence, and I think they hit it off. The chemistry was good.
And that means a lot to Trump. It all is personal.
As he said over and over again. Yeah. And then it leaked, taking all the suspense and all the news value out of it. Right. Trump has selected Pence. So
Which had to drive the master showman Trump nuts.
Right. So he was losing his big moment. So he was trying to interject some suspense back into the process. He calls and tells Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, no, there's 2 other people whose names even haven't surfaced that I'm considering. Complete disinformation, I suspect, but just an attempt to insert a little more uncertainty and suspense back into the process. Corey, still pushing Chris Christie, tells Chris, call Trump right away and make the case for yourself again, which is very embarrassing because you don't run for vice president. The trick is, if you want to be vice president, is to always look like you don't want to be vice president. And he spreads a story that Trump has been buffaloed by Manafort and that he's been euchred into this and he's really unhappy with this. That was all false. I think once the 2 men, bonded, it was over, and he has the right guy.
Do you think the street talk is true that Jared Kushner put the shiv into Christie too, just to kind of even the old family score?
I think it is more likely that Jared may have taken up the cudgels for Newt Gingrich. I've always thought that would be problematic, among other reasons, because the Andy Warhol Foundation wants their wig back.
Yeah, the hair thing would have been a lot. Newt's kind of a backward deal to me. I don't think Trump's change thing would have resonated too well with Newt. And yet Newt's a loose cannon, too. You never know.
Well, he's an 80s figure. It's so retro.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was right. I like Newt. I think he's been helpful to Trump at critical junctures, but he's also been bitterly critical of Trump at critical junctures. And there would have been a tendency, or at least a risk, to upstage the candidate, because Newt is quite concerned with his own political persona. Look, he'll be a great Secretary of Defense, or probably any other job he wants in this administration, and he'd be very good at it. He's an idea guy. He's an issues guy. He's a wonk. Yeah. And I think it'd be additive, but he was not, in my opinion, the right candidate for vice president.
We've both worked for a lot of candidates. They all have their personalities. I remember a guy once, I showed up on the campaign trail, and the kid came out of the hold room wearing a chicken sandwich all over his hair because the candidate had wanted tuna salad, so they were airborne. It was all about the food. Other guys never ever put anybody outside in a rally on the, they all have their thing.
Right.
Their metrics they kind of look for in the day-to-day campaign. Yeah. Some read all the clips, some don't at all.
Right.
What's it with Trump? What kind of candidate is he? What's his thing that he watches that when done right, he's happy?
Nothing will happen on television that he doesn't see. He watches television around the clock. He is addicted to television, and he's a dial flipper. He watches CNN, he watches Fox, he watches MSNBC, and he's a scorekeeper. In other words, if somebody says something bad about him, he remembers that.
I've been waiting for him to attack me, by the way. It would help the Twitter following, because I'm a little rough on him on TV, and I keep saying, come on.
When this is over, we'll see if we can make a deal.
All right, exactly. Yeah, I pay cash money for Twitter attacks. Yeah. Will you go back in if they ask you? Because now we're in the big time, and they don't have. I mean, Manafort is a great operations guy, and he's feisty. And Tony's been around some races. I mean, there's some people there who know stuff, but they don't have a big strategy person there who knows Trump, because he's a special horse. Would you do it?
Well, I'll do anything that he asks me to. We've been friends for 40 years. I met him in '79 when he was on the Reagan campaign finance committee in New York. I recruited him for that. We kind of hit it off. Even then was a political junkie. He wanted to know what the latest polling is. How do you see it? And he detested Jimmy Carter as the weakling that he was. Right, sure. So he was all in for Reagan. But in all honesty, I frankly think I can be more effective outside the tent pissing on Hillary Clinton than inside the tent. So it is. I'd rather have independence, because at my age, I'm too old to clear my statements or my media appearances, and I'm having a very good time. I wrote the Clintons' War on Women to publish the Oppo. Here's the Oppo. You don't have to go do it. It's all right here, and it's all footnoted and sourced and so on.
I've known you a long time, and you do seem to be having a tremendous amount of fun. You've had an interesting career because you were in the kind of establishment political world, and you had a great career there. Then you kind of went off into your stone world for a while, and now you're back. Now you're a big deal. There's a camera crew following us around here. I don't know if it's a porn channel or a documentary or what, but you must be having the ride of your life. Give me a little bit of what it's been like from a personal point of view. Because look, I've been the hottest guy in my field and the coldest, and I've been up and down a couple of times. I know the arc. You're going through that now.
Well, we're now in the age of stone. I mean, I feel like it's come all the way around, back to the days when you and I and Terry Dolan were plotting a takedown of the establishment. Then we became the establishment. Then we became anti-establishment. I even left the party over the revulsion of Mitt Romney. No offense, but I'm severely conservative. No, dude, you're not conservative at all. Mm-hmm. Never have been.
Well, you're a libertarian at heart.
I am a libertarian at heart. And I saw Gary Johnson yesterday, who's now picked Bill Weld, the guy I really like. But I'm on the Trump team. Too late, pal. What's interesting to me, of course,
that ticket should be reversed. It should be Weld Johnson.
I actually suggested that, but Gary Johnson's earned the right for the top slot because he got on the ballot in 48 states, which I'm proud to say I helped him do. He's a very, very good guy. 4 years ago, when he got on the ballot, he actually qualified in 50 states. We had, corrupt Republican judges in Oklahoma and Michigan who screwed us on the law, or he would have been on the ballot in every state. He couldn't get the time of day from the media. CNN wouldn't return anybody's phone calls. He couldn't get covered anywhere. We had to beg to get on Fox Business Channel. Couldn't get covered. Now, suddenly, he's getting monstrous coverage. Why? Because the mainstream media thinks he's taking votes from Donald Trump. That's the only reason he's getting covered. I'm glad to see he's getting covered because they're wrong. In the end, he's going to take as many votes from Hillary as he is from the Republicans because his message has both a right and a left portion of it. So I think that's a misnomer. But, CNN is doing a libertarian town hall. Really? How come they didn't do one 3 years ago?
Yeah, they wouldn't know how to spell it 3 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think
should they put him in the debates?
There's no question. Look, the Presidential Commission on Debates is not appointed by the president, is not a commission, most definitely not about debate. The idea of using a poll as a measure, no, use ballot access as a measure. By the way, under that measure, Jill Stein and the Greens would not have been on the ballot 4 years ago because they didn't get on enough ballots to theoretically reach 270 electoral votes. But if you're on the ballot in 48 states, they had to throw you in the debates. Yeah. And what would have happened if the voters knew that there's one candidate who wanted to legalize marijuana nationally? I think it would have changed the race.
You make a good point. The Presidential Commission is totally self-created.
Right.
And so will this be the year, because Trump might have the leverage to do that. And as a licensing guy and everything, he's thinking about this. You think we might have a different debate architecture this time?
Well, it's certainly possible. Just remember, Manafort was the one who negotiated on behalf of Jim Baker the Carter-Reagan debates. He knows a lot about this. But yeah, the Presidential Commission represents the two-party duopoly that has run this country into the ground. I mean, what have the Republicans and the Democrats together given us? Endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, massive debt and borrowing, huge spending, George W. Bush being worse than any Democrat, as I said earlier, bailouts for the crooks on Wall Street, no jobs, and an incoherent foreign policy. Both parties together gave that to us. We can't lay it all on the Democrats. We can't lay it all on the Republicans. But the idea that Republican members of Congress who voted for an 80% increase in the federal deficit don't want to soil themselves by endorsing Donald Trump, please give me a break.
Part of what I think Trump has done is seized the Republican nomination to use as a platform for his own kind of Trumpism. He's invented his own thing. He's the only guy in our party who will really go after Wall Street, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so that's the grand experiment here. When you think as a Trump guy and somebody who knows political strategy and knows him, give me the dream and the nightmare. The dream is you see an elegant Trump campaign that overcomes some of the obstacles he has in the polling now to get there. And then give me what you worry about. God, I hope he doesn't ... because he might have that proclivity in the clutch.
Well, I'm kind of see this a lot like the Brexit vote. In other words, the polls all said they would lose. The mainstream media said these guys are a bunch of kooks. This is going nowhere. And of course, they won. I think we may be looking at the same measure because I think the race is going to continue to be roiled by big events that nobody foresees. And I think the odds are overwhelming that those big events are going to include the death of Americans or the death of our allies and going to continue to make the terrorism issue dominate the race.
And that plays into strength. He's the hammer.
That plays into strength. So in the end, it may not matter whether he has a single paid TV commercial. It just may not matter. Obviously, the money is a serious question. The Clintons have suitcases of money from the special interests. They've taken money from the Russians and the Chinese and the Saudis. They've, of course, given them preferential treatment in government in return for that. Some might call that treason. Trump is no fool. He is not going to write a $100 million check. He spent $40 million for the nomination. That's not chicken feed, to say the least. And I think in the end, he'll probably end up writing a large check. But he also likes the idea of OPM, other people's money, and he's going to be out raising
he's in real estate, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Leveraging is his thing.
So the winning campaign is kind of this populist revolt that blows up the normal party structures. He gets votes that Republicans don't normally have, finds a way to hold Republican votes together over time, and that's how he upturns the apple cart.
And I predict that he's going to make surprising inroads among African Americans. Right now, my data is anecdotal. Every place I go, and I travel a lot, and I walk through airports, I walk around the streets of New York or the streets of Los Angeles, people recognize me, maybe not by name, but as Trump. Hey, you're Trump's guy. You're Trump's guy. And they want to high five me. They're all black, all of them, men and women. It's like 9 out of 10. Now, that's not a scientific sample, I admit, but I do think there's an aspirational aspect of Trump's message. If he can be the candidate of opportunity and prosperity and says to black people, it's time for you to have a piece of the pie. I want to make you rich and your family rich. I think the sky's the limit because I think black voters look at Trump and they say, wow, that's success. That's how I want to live. That's how I want to live.
And the pop culture thing. He's not credentialed by politics. Arnold had a little of that going,
yes,
too.
Absolutely. I think
there are parallels.
I think the races are, I think there are a lot of parallels there. Just a little disappointed that Arnold's not supporting him, but so be it.
So that's the winning scenario. What do you worry about? What are his weaknesses you think could spin out of control or make a bad decision in a moment that would hurt him in the campaign?
I'm not stupid enough to answer that question. Next.
You got to give me credit for trying.
I understand. But look, I actually think he's going to win. I think he has already made history. Mm-hmm. His nomination is incredibly improbable. He made calculations that I disagreed with as a professional based on 40 years in the business and my own experience.
Like what? Give me a couple.
We need some polling here.
Yeah, sure.
Well, let's find out how the voters feel about all this. But he's instinctual. He operates on instincts, but his instincts are generally very, very good.
They were great in a Republican primary with older white guys. The question is now, will he be able to read the African-American vote and kind of get a right frequency going? And that's he has a great social intelligence. I give him that. He can read a room. He can seize a pulse. So I'm going to be interested to watch how he performs in a general election environment, which, as you well know, is very different demographically than our sainted and ancient Republican primary.
Yeah, but he's a very, very smart guy. His instincts are good. He's going to have to retool a little bit, but he knows that. No one's going to make him retool. He'll retool himself.
He's figured it out. In your discussions with him, he says, look, I get him in a different world now.
I think he understands he's in a different world. I also think he understands that he's never done this before. Look at the questions when they said to him, how are you going to do in these debates? He says, I don't know. I might be terrible. I've never been in a debate, but I'm really looking forward to it. But this I can tell you, there was no practice sessions. They weren't, having somebody stand in as Jeb Bush and that just was never happening. That's just not his style.
Right.
He prepared by reading some stuff and thinking.
Yeah.
And maybe preloading some lines, which shows he's smart like Reagan. He knew that.
It came down to 2 lines every debate.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So he knew that he had to leave with something memorable that would, be the bite for that evening's news.
You don't have the hunger to go inside because you've got this persona now as the dirty tricks king, which, you do have experience in that area.
One man's dirty trick is another man's civic participation.
Yeah, but I know you, and I've known you a long time. Your toolbox is bigger than that. So the idea of being the chief strategist of the thing doesn't appeal a little bit?
Well, look, there are already cooks in that kitchen that I have confidence in, and I have access and can talk to all of them. I'm a big fan of Fabrizio. I'm a big fan of Manafort. Manafort is more than just an operative and an organizer. He's got a great strategic sense. He's elected a lot of strong men, most of them outside the country.
Yeah, occasionally with the campaign slogan, like you have a choice, amigo.
Right, or vote for us or we'll kill you.
Yeah, we know where you live.
Just kidding. No, I have a lot of confidence in those guys. As you know, this is a grueling life.
Oh, it's horrible.
Grueling,
I'm out of it now. I managed to have my last crash and burn, and now I'm pontificating on podcasts.
Hopefully it was profitable.
Not nearly enough. That's I felt a fiduciary responsibility. So no,
that is
money
the
went on the screen.
That is, of course, the name of a recent book by Trump, Never Enough, which I think is.
I should have read his book first. I would have paid myself a little more. So what are you going to be doing if you're on the outside? You're a great provocateur in the media. You're going to be chasing Hillary Clinton around, I'm sure. You'll be doing a ton of media stuff. What else is up the stone sleeves here for the rest of the campaign?
Well, I'm not sure. It's not so much about me. I may work with some 527s. Mm-hmm. I mean, Trump has expressed opposition to super PACs, but he's never said anything about 527s because I'm probably unfamiliar with the structure there. But I think that there is a role to play educating people about the Clintons. I really firmly believe that in the 80s, when our media was less diffuse and more narrow, it was easy to pressure people. So NBC sat on Juanita Broderick's interview for almost 4 months. It sat there in the can. Go back and look at it, by the way. It's very compelling. Lisa Myers essentially had to threaten to quit publicly if they wouldn't run it, and they ran it only after the impeachment vote. There's 26 other women that have not only been assaulted by Bill, but then threatened and intimidated and bullied, the left loves that word, bullied by Hillary. And younger women particularly need to know that. There's so many other foibles, whether it is using insider information to make a score on cattle futures, or the fact that they tell us Vince Foster committed suicide and that his body was found 30 yards down a muddy trail, but there's no dirt or mud on his shoes. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things people don't know about the Clintons that they need to know.
And you're being the business of making sure it's out there.
Exactly.
Where do people follow you on social media or Twitter or any of the other?
Sure. Well, you can go to stonecoldtruth.com. I'm starting a radio show August 1st on the Genesis Communications Network. My friend Alex Jones is going to help me launch that. I still write at stonezone.com. If you need to understand men's fashion and how you can look better, you can go to stoneonstyle.com, where we have a whole separate...
Alan Flusher, still the
Alan Flusher
touchstone?
and Anderson and Shepherd of London. But also I can give you kind of a more downscale way to be well-dressed. It doesn't have to be expensive to be good, to be tasteful. That's a nonpartisan site, by the way. We give fashion advice to both Democrats and Republicans. You can go to rogerstone.com to buy my New York Times bestseller, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, because trust me, Lyndon Johnson did it. Motive, means, opportunity, fingerprint evidence, eyewitness evidence, and deep Texas politics. If you read the book and you come away saying Johnson didn't do it, there's something wrong with you. And then I wrote a book on Watergate, which is far more complicated than people understand. It's not the Woodward and Bernstein narrative. There's more things going on there. And, of course, my most recent book, Jeb and the Bush Crime Family. I'm happy to send you an autograph box.
Oh, I already have plenty of stuff in my fireplace.
Yeah, well, the problem here is that your candidate dropped out 11 days after I published it. So you took a big chunk out of my hide anyway, financially. And then lastly, of course, the Clintons' War on Women, which is the ultimate definitive expose on Bill, Hillary, and their foul-mouthed, greedy, nasty little daughter, Chelsea.
You know how to do a big finish. Roger, thank you very much for doing Radio Free GOP.
Great to be here.
Fight for sanity. Sanity. In this crazy year. On Radio Free GOP.
Well, I think you can tell that Roger Stone is back and he is having the time of his life riding the Trump tornado. How it ends, we will see. But for now, Stone is being Stone. In fact, right after we taped this at the Harbor Inn, Stone and his crew scuttled over to the media center at the convention hall and immediately got into a big media kerfuffle. They held a press conference unveiling a T-shirt with an Obama iconic-style picture of Bill Clinton with the word rape atop it. All hell broke loose. They crashed the streaming broadcast of a lefty talk show called The Young Turks, who exploded, and there was shoving and yelling and pushing and flashbulbs and trouble and media hysteria. In other words, another Thursday in the life of Roger Stone. I want to thank everybody at the Great Harbor Inn in Cleveland for helping us all week host all these interviews. We've got more coming. We did an interview there with the Circus Showtime show with Mark Halpern and John Heilman, all about politics. That'll be on this Sunday night when the podcast comes out. And we're going to do an interview of Heilman a little later. He graciously taped something for us. I want to thank Grace Huffman and Jessica Bocart, both of whom are indispensable, helping me produce the podcast and a whole bunch of interviews this week, as well as run around to do all my other obligations for NBC and otherwise. It was a good time. Thank you to the many delegates who came up and said that they were fans of the podcast. Keep passing the word. Don't keep us a secret. Let everybody know. And here they come, the Thought Police, on us again. Time for another escape. Luckily, Ken, who runs the Harbor Inn, keeps a souped-up 68 Charger around. So with the help of the magic Mopar Hemi, we are going to vanish and leave them in a cloud of dust. Until then, it's goodbye, Cleveland, hello, Trump. And remember, victory will be ours.
Que se ha dado en América, un cambio que sí da gusto ver. Vivimos en paz otra vez, trabajamos otra vez, está mejor que ayer. Me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y lo siento doquiera que voy. Me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y quiero que usted lo sepa hoy. Que yo me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y es algo que da gusto ver aquí. Me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y me siento tan bien en cuanto a mí. Yo me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y es algo que da gusto ver aquí. Me siento tan bien en cuanto a América, y me siento tan bien en cuanto a mí.
This has been Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance, with your host, Mike Murphy.